So, hello again. Well, I don't know about you, but that was the longest week I can ever remember. It wasn't any longer than any other week in reality, but it just seemed to go on and on forever. So, anyway, I thought for today's little offering, I'd go back to simpler times because this, of course, is the start of the if you're a Christian, it's the most sacred week in the Christian calendar. And in Catholicism, we have a pope at the moment who's very big on ecology and on saving the planet. So I'll go back to the Australian bush poetry of Banjo Paterson because it speaks of simpler times when we lived at peace with nature. You know, the prelude that Banjo uses to his collected poems is this, kind of sums up what I'm about. I have gathered these stories afar in the wind and the rain, in the land where the cattle camps are on the edge of the plain. On the overland routes of the West, when the watches were long, I have fashioned in earnest and jest these fragments of song. They are just the rude stories one hears in sadness and mirth, the records of wandering years, and scant is their worth. Though their merits indeed are but slight, I shall not repine if they give you one moment's delight, old comrades of mine. That's kind of what I'm about. Going to try and cut the preamble short because the preambles are getting longer than the pieces. Just a little story to set this piece up. As you know, I said before, I recorded and wrote a radio documentary about Banjo Paterson and his work. I got to read his works. But some years later, I was a guest on a radio program hosted by Mary O'Donnell, who's an Irish poet. And it was to talk about Banjo Paterson and his work. And I told her this little story, sets this piece up, about doing a theatre tour, a tour of a play in Australia, and the venue we were playing at in Sydney was in Sydney University, and the venue was called the Clancy Auditorium. So on opening night, we got a telegram. Hey, remember telegrams? We got a telegram from another theatre company, and it read, "May your Clancy overflow." Now, Australians watching this will know exactly what I'm on about. Irish people, stay with me, you'll get it. I had written him a letter which I had, for want of better knowledge, sent to where I met him down the Lachlan years ago. He was shearing when I knew him, so I sent the letter to him, just on spec, addressed as follows: Clancy of the Overflow. And an answer came directed in a writing unexpected, and I think the same was written with a thumbnail dipped in tar. 'Twas his shearing mate who wrote it, and verbatim I will quote it. Clancy's gone to Queensland droving, and we don't know where he are. In my wild erratic fancy, visions come to me of Clancy, gone a droving down the Cooper where the western drovers go. As the stock are slowly stringing, Clancy rides behind them singing, for the drover's life has pleasures that the townsfolk never know. And the bush has friends to meet him, and their kindly voices greet him in the murmur of the breezes and the river on its bars. And he sees the vision splendid of the sunlit plains extended, and at night the wondrous glory of the everlasting stars. I am sitting in my dingy little office, where a stingy ray of sunlight struggles feebly down between the houses tall, and the fetid air and gritty of the dusty, dirty city, through the open window floating, spreads its foulness over all. And in place of lowing cattle, I can hear the fiendish rattle of the tramways and the buses making hurry down the street, and the language uninviting of the gutter children fighting comes fitfully and faintly through the ceaseless tramp of feet. And the hurrying people daunt me, and their pallid faces haunt me as they shoulder one another in their rush and nervous haste, with their eager eyes and greedy, and their stunted forms and weedy, for the townsfolk have no time to grow, they have no time to waste. And I somehow rather fancy that I'd like to change with Clancy, like to take a turn at droving where the seasons come and go, while he faced the round eternal of the cash book and the journal. But he'd never suit the office. Clancy of the Overflow. May your Clancy overflow. Get it? There you go. Peace. Stay safe. God bless. Take care. By the way, I'm thinking of calling this collection Poems for a Pandemic, or Verses for a Virus, or maybe Calls from a Cocoon. Bye.